Imagine turning passion into powerful leadership on and off the field. At FSU, you can earn a 100% online master's or graduate certificate in athletic coaching. Designed by coaches, for coaches, no matter your experience or sport. FSU Center for Athletic Coaching, educating today's coaches to lead tomorrow's athletes.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Coach Talk. My name's Tim Baghurst, back for another episode, this time with another Tim Wimsatt. He's the managing director of youth caddy programs. Tim, I have to say, a few weeks ago, we had our first golf coach on the show, which is crazy considering we've had over 150 episodes. And now we're going straight back into golf, but this time caddy, which I'm very interested to learn a little bit more about what you do and how you're involved in golf.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tim, for having me. We're making it easy on the viewers today. It's Tim and Tim, so this is the TNT podcast. So, I'm excited to be here and to talk about the work that's happening out here in Colorado with the Colorado Golf Association and our youth caddy programs, and also a little bit more of the national scope for folks to understand how really big this arena is for youth across the country. So excited to be here today.
Yeah, a lot of people, when we think golf, of course, we think about the golfer. And not about the support personnel that goes around golf.
Sure.
Talk to me a little bit about how you train caddies, because if we watch maybe a movie or so, it's usually the dad or it's a buddy, and they kind of hang out together and have a good time. I don't think that's necessarily the truth of what goes behind a caddy being really good at what they do.
For sure. No, it's and I'll take it a step back and give a little bit of backdrop of how I even got here, because I think that's a really interesting piece of this whole story and how really our program at the CGA has evolved over the last 3 years. So my background is actually in education. I was a student athlete in college, played college baseball at the University of Kentucky, and then finished at a small college in my hometown of Owensboro, Kentucky. And then after that, got into high school education. I was a social studies teacher. I was coaching football and baseball. I was kind of doing the classic high school history teacher thing where you're coaching 2 sports and doing all that fun stuff. And then I actually left education altogether and spent some time in a little town just south of Calgary, Alberta, called Okotoks, Alberta. And I was coaching at a baseball academy there where we recruited students from across the nation of Canada, as well as some U.S. students to come and participate in a baseball academy there. Then I actually dipped my toes into college coaching. I was a college baseball coach for 3 seasons at a small Division III school in Louisville, Kentucky called Spalding University. And then got back into education and then moved into the administrative role that's when I moved to Colorado in 2018. And so I was a high school and middle school administrator. And my background in schools was all around programmatic evaluation, student evaluation, teacher coaching. So I was an instructional coach for our staff, developed professional development plans and all those kinds of things. So in 2023, ultimately, I was thinking about kind of my future, and I clicked on a random job posting at the CGA and put my name in the ring. And then ultimately they hired me on in 2023, and we've not looked back since. So my background, my entire work history has been working with young people and in some form or fashion coaching young people. And so as we've spent time at the CGA really thinking about how to enhance our program and think about, how do we impact the next generation of kid, it's really coming through that teaching and coaching lens. And, our big focus is focusing around repetition and focusing on the fundamentals. And there's a phrase that we say all the time when we're talking about caddy training. It's all about raising the floor. Most of our kids that we work with in our programs have zero golf experience whatsoever. So we are starting from ground zero, teaching them what a golf ball, what a golf tee, what a golf club, like all the things that you would take for granted if you're really trying to train a caddy to do their job effectively. We're starting from that starting place. So, really it's a nuanced process. We've created some really good structures and systems where kids get a minimum of 30 rounds in a summer with a one-to-one coach or mentor, as well as our CGA staff stepping in and providing some overhead feedback to students. We have golfers that submit feedback to us through a golfer survey that we use as an evaluation tool. So it is a constant evolution, working with students one-to-one right where they're at, and helping them kind of grow their skill sets over time. So it's really robust. I'm excited to talk it more in the weeds if we get the chance to do that today, but it's at a high level. That's really our big focus when it comes to training youth caddies.
Is there a danger of perhaps creating this program for these caddies? Ask this correctly. Are you producing more caddies than are necessary, given the fact that if you look at golf as a whole, once you find that caddy, they may stick with you for decades. And so how do you present this as a career opportunity for young adults or adolescents?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that we deal with in a lot of ways. So the original purpose of this program with the CGA was to create a pathway towards something called the Evans Scholarship. So for those that aren't familiar with it, the Evans Scholarship is a full housing and tuition scholarship that's administered by the Western Golf Association, who's based out of Chicago. And it's strictly for caddies. It's an incredible thing. So the original goal was to identify students who might meet the criteria for that scholarship, provide them the opportunity to caddy, and then, after 4 years of high school, graduate on and receive that scholarship potentially and go on to their university of choice. So, as we've grown, we now support about 180 students in our programs at the CGA across the state of Colorado. And that's in 5 different markets. We've got 2 in Denver. We're in Fort Collins. We're in Colorado Springs. We're out on the Western Slope in Grand Junction. So we span the entire state. So the big question is, as we bring in more students, yes, that original goal has still carried through. But now we're starting to explore, like, what are some of these new opportunities that we can work and engage kids with, caddying being one opportunity, as well as other post-secondary opportunities that kids may want to pursue. So, it's a really fine balance. The big question that we ask ourselves a bunch, it really comes back to golfer demand at the golf course. We really try to thread the needle to make sure that every kid can have a really robust experience of at minimum of 30 loops per summer, because we just really want them to be able to engage with that job and work with the golfers and those kinds of things. We don't want it to be a flash in the pan experience. So we're constantly looking at that and evaluating that on a programmatic level, because we want to make sure that every kid that comes in has an opportunity to really get the full benefit of this work.
When you think of caddies, a lot of times there's a conversation that involves mathematics, right?
Sure.
Like, caddy is providing a golfer with distance, yards, shot options, club options, etc.
Yeah.
And clearly those are things that can be learned with almost mathematically. But
Sure.
You're on the course with somebody else who is experiencing maybe pressure, anxiety, high levels of arousal, whatever it is. How much of your training of caddies goes into the I guess psychological aspects of working with somebody else?
No, it's something that we really have not we've not thought about that way previously. But what's interesting, that is something that we really observed over the last couple seasons as we've really ramped up our training program. When kids, particularly young people, but I think this is true across the full scope of athletics or really any coaching. If you're working with, if you're a manager of a colleague or something like that in your workplace, when people feel comfortable and competent, it opens the doorway for some of those deeper conversations. We one of the unique parts about our program, Tim, is we have a direct relationship with many of the golfers who actually go out and take our caddies out on the course. And so a couple years ago, I'm out hitting on the driving range. This is a crazy story, but I'm hitting on the driving range, and this guy approaches me. He sees that I'm wearing a CGA logo, he's like, hey, do you work at the CGA? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And he's like, what do you do? And I kind of walk him through it. Well, this guy happens to be a sports psychologist of all things. And roundabout way, he's like, hey, this is my practice. This is what I do. I really want to get involved and figure this out. So, we've now got a sports psychologist who's directly connected to our youth caddies, who's coming and talking to them about, all the things that you just mentioned, and really, tapping into that. And the big thing is he's also really coaching and training our trainers. So our adult mentors who are out there with the kids, and talking to them about that, of like, hey, these are dialogues and conversations that you can have with the young people that you're walking around with. And again, what we talk about a lot, youth caddying is so special because, it's really the only place where a young person, somebody 13 to 18 years old, is going to walk around uninterrupted with an adult who doesn't necessarily love them immediately and is going to, and they're choosing to do that. You can play golf in so many different ways. You can ride a cart, you can walk by yourself, you can take a hoverboard now. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do, but they're choosing to walk around with the youth caddy. So all of those things that you mentioned are things that we're starting to really pay attention to, because it is kind of that next step after our kids, really develop that solid foundational floor. It's so incredible to see these kids who start and they know nothing about the game, and then they're now able to take that next step in their evolution. It's pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah, golf is such a unique sport in the sense that you're being evaluated shot by shot.
Yeah, yeah.
You really have only one supporter
for
on
sure
that course with you, and
for sure.
It becomes important that supporter can understand you and work with you. And one might argue that while you may have a hitting coach or a putting coach or something like that, and a lot of golfers obviously have their sports psychologists as well, there's only one person that's coaching them on the course, and that's
exactly
next to them. So it's an interesting dynamic. When you look at the system that you've developed, what are some of the challenges that you've seen in, dare I say, coaching these caddies to become caddies?
It's a great question. I mean, I would kick this back to you as well. I'll kind of give mine, and I'm kind of curious because I think this parallels to any coaching experience that somebody might have, but I'd love to kind of get your gauge on it as well. Going all the way back to whenever I was coaching college baseball, and when you're coaching college athletics, you're recruiting kids into your program, and there's kind of a baseline level of ability that's already there. It's, when you're talking to a young athlete and you're really trying to land, how do you fit into this program and all those kinds of things. There's always this base. You're not recruiting that kid if you don't think they have the talent to be there, fundamentally. And so this program is very different because most of our kids, like the talent to caddy is something that you can learn over time, regardless of your entry point. But inside of that, there's a phrase that I've always used of like, every kid learns it on their own schedule, and I think that in and of itself is the beauty of this. But it's also the challenge of this. We have kids who pick it up immediately. It's like you tell them once and they do it. Another kid, you demonstrate it once and they do it. And then some kids, it's almost like they've gone through 10 sessions of training and it's like you've never even shown them the thing, whatever it may be. So you got to come up with a new and innovative way to communicate it. So I would say the individuality of it is probably the biggest challenge. The basics kind of are the basics. And once you get used to that, and once you have enough repetition at that, you're able to do it repeatedly and feel successful at it. But it's just figuring out how to connect with that kid on a one-to-one level. And sometimes it's the right person at the right time. The message gets delivered by the right mentor or the right coach or whatever it may be. So I would say that's the biggest challenge. And again, I think that's probably a universal experience, but I'm curious just your perspective of working with folks who are getting into the athletic coaching realm. Does that hold weight across the board?
Look, I've got a 16-year-old boy who went to practice yesterday, had a horrible practice. What's going on? I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
And that's the age and maturity level that
Sure.
you're working with. where you're going to get days where this adolescent is gone and engaged and wanting to do well, and you're also going to get them when they show up and they're not interested to be there, or they don't want to learn, or something's going on in their life. So I think you're spot on, and a lot of it comes down to, I think, intrinsic motivation. How much do you want to be good at this? And are you willing to lay aside your ego to get better by being worse? And I think that's a continual battle, particularly with teenagers who are so often evaluated by how they compare to other people. How true is that in sports, where we're all trying to get better, we're all trying to improve, but our improvement is often by comparison to somebody else next to us.
For sure.
And therefore, we experience some of the challenges of the teenage world, where we may have them on one day and off the next, and we have no idea why. And we've got to, as supporters of them, find that conversation, that balance to understand what's going on. As a coach, do I look at my son and go, oh yeah, I'm really proud of you today? No, absolutely not. But I need to understand why you had this attitude. And if this attitude is you don't want to play this sport anymore, or you don't want to be a caddy, maybe that's best for you. Maybe we're pushing you down a route that isn't healthy for you. But it may be that, you know what, you didn't eat lunch properly, and so you're hangry, and it was just a bad day. So a lesson here is to make sure you have that snack or that meal before you get on the course, because that changes everything. You're spot on in that respect. I wanted to ask you though, when you said it yourself, you were a player before you became a coach. And there's this almost rite of passage. If you want to obtain success at the higher levels, there is an expectation that you've done so as an athlete. Now, you and I, we can disagree with that and argue against that and explain to everybody why that's an invalid argument. But for the golfer who's on the course, who may be working with a caddy for the first time, or doesn't know them, or doesn't trust them, the first question I expect they may ask is, so do you play? And you said you've got people in your program who I don't know what a golf ball is. How does that, do you think, affect how they work as a caddy?
It's a great question. And it's varied, I would say. We do a lot of front end work at the CGA, and particularly so the CGA actually owns a golf course called Common Ground Golf Course. That was the original program. We've now expanded to 5 across the state. And at Common Ground specifically, we do a lot of front end work of coaching our coaches and trainers and golfers about what we're basically level setting expectations before we walk out there. So if they're going to walk out with a kid who it's first time on the golf course and those kinds of things, we try to preempt that. We have a full-time staff member who oversees that particular caddy program. He's a golf professional, so he knows, many of the members and golfers at Common Ground that play, and has done a fantastic job of really bridging that gap between caddy program and golf course operations and golfer. Like he manages that beautifully. So a lot of it is that, just kind of level setting and table setting the expectations. However, one of the things that we've really seen take off due to this training program, because again, we focused so hard on landing and hitting the basics well. Our second year caddies, they actually are now, they graduate out and are able to go and caddy for anybody, and caddy on the championship course and do 18-hole rounds and do it as much as they want to do it. And the feedback that we've received from golfers who have participated in our program previously, as well as new golfers, is it's a night and day difference, because we've spent so much intention around focusing on those skills. And so, ultimately, I think that question does get asked a lot. And I actually think it plays in our favor a little bit because, these kids are really, really good at the job that they do because of the training program that they've gone through, and they don't have the golf background. So golfers are almost like amazed at the fact that a kid who doesn't have that introductory working knowledge can get to the level that some of our kids get to. But I think your point, Tim, about intrinsic motivation is a big, big piece of this. It's a hard job to do. It's 4 to 5 hours. It's, 100 degrees out here in Denver in the summer. You're walking 5 to 6 miles carrying a bag. I mean, some of our golfers, although they think they're really good, they certainly aren't. So they're hitting it all over the place. I mean, it's a job. It's a chore. So you've got to want to do that. You've got to want to show up. And, one of the things that you were talking through, and I'd be curious your perspective on this. I think the undercurrent of what you were talking about that conversation with your son or a coach with a player, the undercurrent of that is focusing on relationships first and really like getting to know that kid and what is the button you can push with that kid at that time to really try to get to the info that helps you kind of hand on the lower back and guide them through. Because every athlete, every player, every caddy is different and they're motivated differently. Some are motivated by, success and perfectionism. Some are motivated by, social acceptance. Some are motivated by, in our case, the money. So it's trying to figure out what that button is and get into that. But that's a really, it's a relational conversation more than anything. I'm curious, in your work, how does that play out? How does that come up and how is that discussed in you all's realm?
Yeah, I'll certainly say that coaching your kid is probably one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do. Yeah. Also the most fun too, in its moments. But the reality of coaching is, and I had a guest on the show several years ago who told me, I can give you my program, I can give you my plan, I can give you my training and methodology, and it's immaterial to the relationship I have with my athletes.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, that stuff doesn't matter as much. It really boils down to how do I interact with the people I work with, and how do they interact with me? Do they trust me? Do they have hope? Is there a future for them? If you can develop those things, then you see flourishing. And it all builds up to how do you build a culture in your program?
For sure.
How do you build it? I'll rephrase. We all have a culture in our program. How do we build a culture that we want in our program? Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to when I do a lecture on this, I talk about the systems, I talk about the people, and I talk about the place.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the people here. And the people are probably the most important component of that culture. So you're spot on in that sense. Question from me.
Sure.
How do you navigate telling a caddy maybe that this isn't for them, or this is you're not doing your requirements or expectations that you had when you agreed to do this?
Yeah,
that can't be an easy conversation, but again, you're doing things in the best interest of everybody. How do you do that? Because as a coach, that's part of the job.
Yeah. It's the hardest conversation to have, and it's two-sided. I think the conversation with the kid. So again, going back to my background, I was a high school and middle school discipline dean. So I had some really hard conversations in school. So I got a front row ticket to having some of the hardest conversations that you can have with kids and families. So I'm probably more, more callous to it than most people. But it's difficult. It's hard to tell a kid and a family like, hey, we're gonna go our separate ways here. But I think it's two-sided. Usually with the student, with the kid, they've already been there prior to you having that conversation. And a lot of times it's hard to give a scientific explanation. A lot of times it's just your intuition and your gut. Your feel of the situation sometimes most of the time is leaning correct. I won't say it's always correct, but it leans correct, at least for the circumstance. But it goes back to that relationship piece, at least on some level, of like kind of getting in there and talking with the kid first. And if you're doing the job well, you're having those conversations along the way. You're coaching them along the way. You're seeing, is this resonating? Does this kid, are they showing the interest, the engagement to want to learn it, to want to be here? And so the kid usually is more prepared than the parent on our end. And the parent conversation is where it gets tough. And again, in our program specifically, a lot of families are approaching this not necessarily because they're interested in caddying. They hear full housing and tuition scholarship at the end of this road, and that's kind of where they've hitched their wagon. So we do a lot of work, again, with families talking about how this is an outcome. It's not an outcome for everybody. So know that going in, and sometimes that weeds people out before they ever even come in the door. And then the other side is when we get to that place where we're having that conversation with a student and a family, just explaining, and again, using our objective data points, golfer feedback, coaching feedback, phone calls, emails saying, hey, if you've missed a practice, like we use all those kind of objective data points as a backdrop to the conversation. And sometimes that helps. I think that's the more information that you can bring that's like concrete and factual, and it's not just completely subjective and opinion, the better. But it's hard because you're sometimes you're breaking the kid's heart, sometimes you're breaking the parent's heart. But in the end, most people, if you've done the front end work, they get it and they understand it. And you let them know. It's like, hey, we'll support you if you want to try to find another program. There's plenty of other programs that are out there that don't require this level of intensity and engagement. That's an option as well to try to soften the blow.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is, at least for the kid, it should not come as a surprise.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Parents, yeah. Well, it depends maybe what the kid has been telling the parents, but
sure. Yeah.
But they should know when you're having that conversation. Yeah, we've had these conversations before. I've seen the data. Yeah. I knew this was coming.
Yeah. And I think, Tim, in high school sports, and I'm curious on the collegiate level. I've not been in that world in a while. It's been, 10 years now since I've coached a college game. Back then, back in my day, it was very kind of, there was a separation between kid and parent. I would imagine that today, just with the way that schools and everything have evolved, that probably is a little bit more of a challenge now of parents being more active in their kids' college experience as it was, 10, 15 years ago. How has that evolved in your time doing this work? And just, I guess, what are the challenges there for a new coach who's maybe wanting to pursue the collegiate level versus the high school level?
To be honest, I don't know that I have the expertise to tell you because I haven't coached college. My coaching was international and professional as well as amateur. But even as a international coach of kids, the parents are there. Trust me. Yeah. It doesn't matter what level. If you have kids, the parents will be involved in some way. And it makes sense. I have a son going to college for the first time this weekend.
Yeah.
We're pretty involved in that process.
For sure.
Involved in what things he's packing and where he's staying and what he's studying and has he registered and we're very involved in that. So from that perspective, I think nothing is going to change. Parents care about their kids. They want to be involved in their kids' lives, especially in your situation where they're going away from home.
Right.
That adds another dimension to it. Well, Tim, I want to be thoughtful of your time. I know this has been a fun conversation, by the way. Yeah. If somebody wants to reach out, maybe interested in your programming or just learning a little bit more about what you do, what's the best way for them to reach out?
No, I'm happy to do it. And Tim, thank you again for having me on. And I'll come back and talk about, I feel like I have the best job in the world. I get a chance to work with young people and talk about, what we consider the best first job that a kid can have. So it's a pleasure to be here. If folks want to learn more, the best way to do so would be to go to coloradogolf.org. There is a program tab. You can click on Caddy Programs. It gives you a nice snapshot of some of the additional work that we do off the golf course with our students as well. But if you want to reach out to me directly, my email is twimsatt. So right there on the screen, twimsatt@coloradogolf.org. feel free to connect with me anytime. Again, I'm always around. I'm always available and always looking forward to talking about youth caddies and the broader youth caddy landscape across the country. So happy to do it. And thank you, Tim, for having me on today. This has been great.
Well, thank you as well. And just a big thank you to everybody watching or listening on. Just a reminder, we try to do these every few weeks or so. So be sure to find us on Spotify or YouTube. And of course, before I forget, October 10th, we're hosting our coaching clinic here at Florida State. We have two options. You can come in person, but you can also register for asynchronous virtual, i.e. you don't have to be logged in all day watching us. We will record the talks and then send them to you at the end. So if you're interested in that, be sure to go to our website, check out the coaches clinic that's coming up October 10th. That's a wrap for us. On behalf of myself, Tim Baghurst, and of course, Tim Wimsatt, thanks so much for watching.